I still remember the first night I noticed it. The power had gone out across the entire street, leaving everything wrapped in a thick, unnatural silence. No hum of appliances, no distant traffic, just the soft sound of my own breathing in a room that suddenly felt too large. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, staring into the dark where my wall used to be visible, trying to convince myself it was just another blackout. But the darkness didn't feel empty that night. It felt occupied. Every few seconds, I thought I saw movement, just at the edge of vision, where the human eye refuses to focus properly. A slight shift, a shape that wasn't there when I looked directly at it. I told myself it was my imagination adjusting to the absence of light. Still, I couldn't stop the feeling that something was learning how to exist inside the dark with me. Then I heard it, a soft, uneven breathing that didn't match my own. I reached for my phone flashlight, my hands shaking more than I wanted to admit. The moment the light turned on, everything froze. Nothing stood where I thought I had seen movement. No shape, no shadow, just my room, quiet and still. But when I turned the light off again, that's when I saw it watching me from just a few feet away. And I never turned the light off alone after that night. It was a summer night when the power went out. Warm air still hung in the room, heavy against my skin, like the city had forgotten how to breathe. I remember the exact moment it happened. No warning, no sound of failure, just a sudden absence of everything electrical. The hum of fans, the distant buzz of streets, even the refrigerator's saw pulse. Gone. At first, it felt normal. A citywide blackout. Nothing more. People would say it was a transformer issue, a grid failure, something explainable. But the darkness didn't feel empty. It felt layered, like it had depth, like it was sitting in a room in levels I couldn't see. I stood still, letting my eyes adjust. The air grew quieter than it should have. Even my own breathing sounded careful, like it didn't want to be heard too loudly. That was when I noticed the corners of the room. They weren't just dark. They were darker than the rest of the darkness, like something had gathered there first. I blinked slowly, waiting for my vision to settle. But the shadows didn't settle with it. They shifted instead. Soft, almost patient. At first, I told myself it was just my eyes playing tricks. The brain trying to create shapes where there was nothing. But then the shapes started holding, not forming fully. Not yet, just suggesting themselves. A bend in the corner, that wasn't part of the wall. A thin stretch of black that didn't match the angle of the room. Something almost standing, then deciding not to. I reached for my phone. The flashlight clicked on with a small, sharp burst of white light. The room snapped into visibility. Walls, table, dust floating like pale ash. But the corners stayed wrong. The light hit them directly and nothing appeared. No shape, no object, no cause, just absence pretending to be empty. I moved the light slowly across the room. The beam felt thin, weaker than it should have been, like the darkness was pressing back against it. That was when I saw it. Not clearly, only when I wasn't looking straight at it. A figure, near the far side of the room. Not tall, not short, just present in a way that didn't belong to anything human. The moment I tried to focus on it, it was gone. My eyes landed on nothing but wall and shadow. I turned my head slightly away on purpose, and there it was again, standing closer than before. My fingers tightened around the phone. The light wavered a little just from my grip. The figure did not move like walking. It shifted like a thought I couldn't fully understand. I told myself to keep looking directly at it, to pin it down, to make it stop existing in that impossible way. But when I stared straight ahead, there was nothing, only darkness arranged too neatly, only silence that felt too aware. I turned off the flashlight for a second. The room changed instantly, not visually, something deeper, like the space expanded without permission, like the walls stepped back slightly, giving the darkness more room to stand. And in that moment, I felt more than saw it. Something was still there, waiting for me not to look. I turned the flashlight back on quickly. The beam returned. Weak again. Strained. The corners of the room looked normal now. Too normal. That was worse, because I could still feel it. Behind me, to the side. Not fixed in one place anymore. Like it wasn't moving through space. but through attention, I slowly turned in a circle, holding the light steady. Everywhere I pointed, nothing appeared. Everywhere I didn't, felt heavier. The air started to feel tighter, not physically, but like the room was becoming aware of being observed. I swallowed, and the sound felt too loud in my ears. For a moment, I thought I heard something else. Not a step, not a voice, just a suggestion of presence adjusting itself. I forced myself to stand still. The phone light flickered once. Just once. And in that flicker, I saw it again. Closer, not approaching. Already there. Right at the edge of what I refused to look at directly. My eyes locked forward. I didn't move them this time. And for a brief moment, everything felt normal again. Just a dark room. Just a blackout. Just me. Then I made the mistake of relaxing. Not even fully. Just slightly. My focus softened, and the figure returned instantly. Now it felt like it was no longer hiding. It didn't need to, because it knew I would stop seeing it eventually. I stepped backward without meaning to. My heel hit the edge of the floor unevenly. The sound felt too sharp in the silence. And I realized something simple, but wrong. The blackout outside had not changed anything in here. It had only revealed what was already present. Something in the darkness that did not depend on light. Something that only waited for attention to break. I kept the flashlight on, but I stopped trusting it, because it no longer felt like a tool. It felt like a boundary, and something was learning how to cross it. Outside, the city remained silent. No generators. No distant recovery hum. Only darkness pressing against every surface like a living weight. I stood in the center of my room, holding the weak beam of light steady, and I stopped trying to look directly at anything, because every time I did, there was nothing, and every time I didn't, I was no longer alone. I moved into the apartment on a quiet evening. The air outside still carried warmth from the day, but inside it felt slightly colder, not by temperature, by presence. The landlord said the place was old but stable, cheap rent, good location, quiet building. I remember noticing how fast the sunlight left the room, faster than it should have, as if the walls were helping the night arrive sooner. That first night, I turned off the lights early, wanted to see how it felt in natural darkness. But the darkness didn't settle evenly. It arrived in patches, like it was filling the room from different directions at different speeds. I sat on the bed listening. No traffic sound, no distant hum of the city. Only the faint ticking of something inside the walls. Then it stopped, not gradually, just gone. And in that silence, I realized something. The apartment wasn't empty when it was dark. It was waiting for me to notice it. A soft flicker came from the ceiling light switch. Even though it was off, I stared at it for a long time. Nothing else moved, but the darkness felt heavier near the corners of the room, like it preferred them. That night, I didn't sleep well. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the room become deeper, as if sleep and darkness were feeding each other. At one point, I heard footsteps inside the apartment. Slow, careful, but when I opened my eyes, everything was still. Only the silence remained. The next evening, I noticed something worse. Mirrors. My reflection was slightly delayed. Not by much, just a fraction of a second, but enough to notice. Enough to feel wrong. When I raised my hand, my reflection followed late, like it was remembering what I had already done. I stopped looking at it directly after that, but I could still feel it, watching a version of me that wasn't fully in sync. That night, I turned the lights off again, and the apartment reacted faster. Darkness didn't just arrive. It rushed in. I felt it move through the hall before I even stepped into it. And I knew then it wasn't just darkness anymore. It was something that learned the layout of my space. Something that was getting familiar with me. There was a neighbor across the hall. I only saw him once or twice in passing. Never in clear light. Never in detail. His apartment windows were always dark. Not dim. Not shaded. Just completely absent of light. At first, I thought he traveled often, or worked night shifts. But time passed and nothing changed. No glow, no movement behind curtains. Just constant, unnatural darkness. One night, I came home late. The The hallway lights were flickering slightly, the kind of unstable hum that makes the air feel thin. My keys felt heavier in my hand. That's when I noticed his door was slightly open, just a crack, and inside nothing, no light, no furniture outline, no depth, just black, not like a room, like a cut in reality. I stepped closer without meaning to. The hallway light above me blinked, once, and in that blink of darkness, I saw him, standing right in front of my door, close enough that I should have heard breathing. But there was nothing, no sound at all. I froze. The light came back, and he was gone. Only the hallway remained, empty. Still, I told myself it was a trick of timing, a flicker, a coincidence. But that night, something changed. I heard knocking, soft, right at my door. I looked through the peephole. Nothing was there. But the moment the hallway light went out again, the knocking came again, closer this time, like it only existed when I couldn't see. I stopped opening the door after that, but the presence didn't stop visiting. It learned the rhythm of the building, when the lights would fail, when the silence would deepen, and every time darkness returned, it felt closer than before. It started with curiosity. I used my phone to record the room at night. No reason. Just a habit I couldn't explain. I would place it on the table and let it film while I slept. In the morning, I checked the footage. At first, nothing unusual, just darkness. But then I noticed movement, not visible in real time, only in playback. Shadows standing in corners that were empty when I checked, shapes slightly out of proportion, too still to be natural. I tried again the next night. Same result, but worse. This time, the shadow appeared behind me while I was sitting in the video. But I remember the room clearly. There was nothing behind me. I turned the phone around and recorded the empty space directly. Nothing. But in playback, something stood there, always just outside correct alignment. Like the camera was seeing a version of the room I wasn't allowed to. The phone started behaving differently after that. It turned on by itself at night, screen glowing faintly in the dark. Always recording, even when I turned it off, even when I removed the battery. The darkness in the footage started looking denser, heavier, like it had texture, like it could press against the screen from the other side. Sometimes I would hear the phone vibrate, but there were no notifications, only recording, always recording. I stopped trusting my own eyes after that, because the camera showed more than I could see, and what it showed was always waiting for me to notice it. My hallway was simple, straight line, few steps, one light at the center. During the day, it felt normal, short, familiar, but at night, it changed. The first time I noticed, I was walking to the kitchen in the dark. Halfway through, I realized I wasn't there yet. The hallway kept going, longer than before, not physically stretching, but emotionally extending, like distance itself had become uncertain. I stopped walking. Listened. Silence pressed in from both ends. Then I heard it, a soft movement at the far end. Not loud enough to be footsteps, just enough to suggest waiting. I turned on my phone flashlight. The beam felt weak immediately, like it was tired. The hallway looked normal in light. Short again, safe again. But when I turned slightly away, it stretched back out, and something stood at the end. Only when I wasn't looking directly. I tried to walk back, but returning felt harder, like the hallway was resisting direction, like it preferred me moving forward instead of back. Each night after that, it got worse, longer in darkness, shorter in light, until I stopped trusting distance entirely, because it no longer stayed the same twice, and something at the end never stopped waiting for me not to look. It appeared on the wall one morning, right next to the original switch. Same shape, same faded plastic, but slightly newer, like it hadn't been there yesterday. I stood in front of it for a long time. The apartment felt too quiet around me. Even the usual wall hum was missing. The second switch didn't match anything I knew. No label, no indicator, just presence. I reached out slowly and flipped it. Nothing changed at first. The room stayed the same, but the silence didn't. It deepened, like something had tightened behind the walls. A faint whisper followed, not from outside, from inside the structure itself. I turned the switch back. The whisper stopped instantly, but the relief didn't come. Instead, it felt like something had noticed me reacting. That night, I tested it again. Off. Whispers. On. Silence. But the silence was worse. Too aware, like it was listening back. By the third night, the switch began moving on its own. Small shifts, slight changes in position. Always between morning and night. Always when I wasn't watching. I stopped using it. But it didn't stop being used. There was one room in the apartment I avoided, not for any clear reason, just a feeling I couldn't place. During the day, it looked normal. Walls, floor, empty space. But at night, it changed. Shadows didn't behave correctly inside it. I noticed it the first time I left the hallway light on. The chair in the room cast a shadow, but it arrived late, like it was thinking before forming. I turned off the light to test it. That was a mistake. In darkness, the room didn't become empty. It stayed visible in a strange way. Shapes remained, but they didn't match objects. The shadow of the table stood slightly away from the table itself. The bed's darkness leaned in the wrong direction, and in the center, something else existed, not fully formed, but present among the shadows. When I tried to look directly at it, it stopped, like attention weakened it. I left the room immediately after that, and I didn't return. But sometimes from the hallway, I still see movement that doesn't belong to anything inside. It began as a blackout across the village. Simple at first. People said it would be fixed in hours. But morning never brought light back. Only deeper night. Generators failed strangely, not from damage, but from timing. They stopped exactly when darkness felt strongest, as if responding to it. I walked outside once. The air felt heavier than usual, like it carried weight instead of wind. Every house was dark, but not empty. People said they could feel others inside their rooms, even when no movement was seen. Sometimes, lights would return briefly, only in abandoned houses, never in occupied ones. I stopped asking why, because answers didn't hold anymore. Only patterns did, and the pattern was simple. The darker it became, the more something seemed to settle into place. I started using candles when the electricity became unstable. At first, it felt comforting. Small flame, small control. But the flame didn't behave normally. It flickered without wind, bent toward corners of the room, like it was watching something I couldn't see. I noticed the darkness gathering closer when the candle dimmed, not spreading, approaching. Each time the flame lowered, the air felt tighter, closer to my skin. One night, I let the candle go out on purpose. I don't know why. The moment it died, the room changed, not visually, but physically, like something stepped forward in the absence of light. I relit it quickly. My hands were shaking. The flame returned, but weaker, as if it remembered being alone. After that, I stopped letting it go out, but the candle didn't stop trying. It kept leaning toward darkness, as if answering something inside it. The basement was always colder than the rest of the house, even in summer, even with lights on. But the strangest thing wasn't the cold. It was how the lights behaved. Every time I went down there, the switch position was different, never consistent, as if it forgot what state it was meant to stay in. One night, I went down without turning on the light, just to see. The darkness felt immediate, complete, like it erased the stairs behind me. I reached the bottom carefully. The air felt denser with every step, and then I heard voices, not speaking directly, echoing through the walls, as if the basement was remembering conversations that never happened. I stayed still, listening. Something moved above me. Footsteps, slow, climbing the stairs I had just come down. I froze. The sound continued upward, step by step, but I knew I was alone in the house. When I finally turned back toward the stairs, nothing was there, only the suggestion that something had just left, and that it now knew how to return. The street outside my home looks normal during the day. Asphalt, wires, poles leaning slightly under summer heat. But at night, it changes in a way I can't explain easily. The street lights don't just flicker. They reverse. They turn off before they turn on, like the night is arriving ahead of time, and light is trying to catch up. I noticed it while walking back home after midnight. 1 second the street was lit, the next already dark before the light could finish fading. It felt wrong, like time had slipped a step sideways. Cars passed slowly, distant engines humming low, but their headlights didn't reach anything. No reflection on walls, no glow on the road, just moving brightness swallowed before it could exist. Between each flicker of the lamps, I saw shapes, not standing fully, not walking, just appearing in the gaps between light and darkness, as if they lived inside the in-between. By the time I reached my gate, the street no longer felt like a place. It felt partially erased, like something had been removed from it in pieces, and only the timing of light was holding it together. At first, it seemed like normal electrical failure. One house losing power at night. Mine, every night. No neighbors affected. No street outage. Only my home. I asked around. They said everything was fine outside. Perfectly stable grid. But inside it wasn't. The moment evening arrived, the lights would fail. Not abruptly. More like a decision being made somewhere unseen. And then darkness would settle in. Familiar and immediate. At first, I checked breakers, wires, fuse box, connections. Nothing changed anything. The outage ignored cause. It only responded to time. And to me, inside the dark, the house didn't feel empty. It felt aware, like it recognized the pattern of my movements. Each night, I started noticing more presence, not visible fully, just closer. Like something was learning how I moved in reduced light. Neighbors began avoiding my house without explanation. They said nothing was wrong, but they stopped visiting, stopped asking, as if the darkness around my home was spreading socially, not physically. And every night when power failed again, it felt less like an outage and more like a rival. It started with small things. A second voice in the apartment, soft, careful, responding when I spoke into empty rooms. At first, I thought it was echo or tiredness, but it only happened at night. When lights were off, during darkness, the voice became clearer, closer, like someone standing just outside my line of sight. I asked once if anyone else was there. A pause followed, then a reply, not answering the question, just acknowledging it. When I turned on the lights, everything stopped. The apartment became completely silent again. No trace of presence. No echo. No confirmation. Only me, but in darkness, the roommate returned. They never turned on lights. Never stepped into brightness. As if light erased them completely. Over time, I stopped speaking when lights were on. It felt pointless, because they only existed in the absence of visibility. Photos taken during the day never captured anything. Just empty rooms. Perfectly normal. Too normal. Eventually, the voice changed. Slightly at first. Then noticeably. Like something was learning how to speak through it. And then one night, it stopped responding to me. But kept talking anyway. The elevator in the building was old. Slow doors. Slight tremor when moving. Nothing unusual during the day. But at night, it behaved differently. It stopped whenever the lights flickered, not at floors, not at mechanical intervals, but in moments of instability, like it refused to move through uncertainty. I first noticed it while going down. Halfway between floors, the light inside blinked, and the elevator froze. No motion, no sound, just suspended space. In that pause, the reflective panels inside the elevator changed. My reflection was still there, but something stood behind it, not clearly formed, just darker than the rest of the darkness, present in a way that didn't belong to me. When the light returned, it was gone. The elevator continued as if nothing had happened, but the floor number displayed was wrong. I got off anyway. The hallway outside was not the same as before, slightly shifted, like direction had been edited. After that, I avoided using it at night, but I still heard it sometimes. Stopping, between floors, waiting for light to decide what reality should be. I noticed that the first time I tried walking through the house at night with a flashlight, the beam didn't travel normally. It stopped too early, like the air was absorbing it. The light never reached the corners, never fully touched the walls. It faded before it should have, as if the house was swallowing brightness before it could settle. I pointed the flashlight down the hallway. The beam shortened, not gradually, instantly, like distance itself had changed rules. The darkness didn't just remain. It expanded around the light, making space for itself. I could still see movement in peripheral vision, small shifts, slight distortions, nothing fully visible when looked at directly, but always present when ignored. The house felt different too, not structurally, emotionally, like it was aware of being observed through limited light and adjusting accordingly. I tried turning the flashlight off completely. The darkness didn't get worse. It got closer, as if the light had been holding it back only temporarily. After that, I stopped trusting illumination inside the house because it didn't reveal things anymore. It only negotiated with them. It started as an experiment, a simple announcement. One night, every light in the city turned off. No street lamps, no homes, no screens, just controlled darkness. At first, it felt almost peaceful, the kind of silence that looks safe from a distance. I remember standing at my window, waiting. The city didn't glow anymore. It just existed, dim shapes, still air, no movement of light at all. But something was wrong immediately. People didn't turn their lights back on when instructed. They refused, not all at once, slowly, like the idea of light had become difficult to return to. Messages stopped arriving. Phones went silent one by one. And in the darkness, something was said to arrive fully. No one explained what fully meant, only that once it did, turning lights back on didn't feel possible anymore. I tried once, just a switch, but my hand hesitated. Not fear exactly, more like resistance from the room itself. And I stopped. The child lived in the apartment above mine. Small footsteps, light movement, constant presence. At first, I only noticed sounds at night. Talking, soft one-sided conversations. No response from adults, only the child speaking into corners of rooms. When I asked the parents, they said it was imagination. Kids do that, but I listened carefully. There was no playfulness in the voice, only focus, like the child was listening to something very close. When lights were on, the child stopped talking, completely silent. But when darkness came back, the conversation resumed, and sometimes paused, like waiting for an answer. One night, I saw it briefly. The child standing still in a dim hallway light, staring at nothing. Then the lights went out, and the child turned their head slightly, as if someone had finally responded. After that, they refused to stay in lit rooms. Only darkness, only waiting. The power plant sat outside the city. Constant hum, constant operation. It never shut down, not even for maintenance pauses. Engineers said it was stable, too stable. But workers started reporting things. Shadows inside sealed rooms, places where no one should be, lights flickering inside control panels without cause, screens briefly showing shapes that weren't part of any system data. At night, corridors felt different, longer than during the day, like the building expanded when unobserved. Some engineers refused certain sections entirely, not because of danger alarms, but because of feeling, the sense that something was using the infrastructure, not breaking it, operating through it. One worker described it simply: we're not generating electricity anymore. We're hosting something that is. After that, fewer people stayed overnight, and the plant continued running without them noticing the difference. It was an ordinary mirror, bathroom-sized, slightly O-frame. Nothing special about it during the day, but at night, reflections changed. The first time I noticed, I turned off the light while standing in front of it, and the reflection didn't disappear immediately. It paused, like it was deciding whether it still needed to exist. Then it vanished, not smoothly, like something had switched off inside it. But the mirror wasn't empty. Darkness remained, not surface reflection, something deeper. Shapes began appearing where my reflection should have been, standing too still, too patient. When I turned the light back on, they vanished instantly. but my own reflection felt delayed afterward, slightly off, like it was remembering movements late. The longer I looked at the mirror in darkness, the more unstable it became, until I started avoiding it completely at night, because it didn't reflect me anymore. It reflected what stayed behind me when I stopped paying attention. It began with a simple observation. Whenever a bright light was on at night, darkness gathered closer, not retreating from illumination, moving toward it. I noticed it first in streetlights, then in homes, then in my own room. The brighter the light, the heavier the surrounding darkness felt, like it was concentrating, waiting, and when the light switched off, it didn't fade away. It arrived instantly, closer than before. No transition, no delay, just presence filling the space left behind. People began dimming their homes without explanation, avoiding brightness altogether, as if visibility itself was becoming unsafe. At first, I thought light was protection, but it started feeling like a signal instead, something that invited attention, something that marked a place as seen. And in the dark, being seen was never the goal, only being found. The first time the emergency lights activated, it felt like relief, a soft red glow in the building corridors. Weak, steady, artificial comfort. But the silence around them wasn't normal. It was listening. I noticed it during another outage night. The emergency lights flickered on automatically, not bright enough to clear the darkness, just enough to outline it. And then I heard something, not clearly at first, more like pressure behind sound. Whispers coming from the lights themselves, not from the bulbs, from the glow. The words didn't form meaning at first, just repetition, patterns of sound that felt familiar without being language, as if the light was remembering speech instead of producing it. When I stepped closer, the whisper stopped, but the silence felt heavier afterward, like it was holding something back. Later, the lights flickered again, and the whispers returned. Only this time, they seemed to respond to movement. Following me, I stopped walking under them after that. But even in darkness, I could still hear them sometimes, as if the building was replaying what the light had heard. The house looked normal from outside. Simple structure, ordinary windows. But inside, there was no real daylight, not even during noon. It felt like early evening all the time, a permanent half-darkness that never fully resolved into brightness. I asked about it once. They said it was architectural design, intentional placement, shadow control, nothing unusual, but it didn't feel designed. It felt sealed, like light had been excluded, not managed. Inside, shadows appeared before movement. I noticed it while placing objects. A shadow would form slightly ahead of time, like it knew where things would go. Residents didn't stay in one room for long, not because of discomfort they could explain, but pressure, a feeling of being observed without direction, like the house didn't need eyes. It only needed absence of light. Leaving the house always felt easier than entering it, like stepping out of something that was already closing. It started quietly. In total darkness, I began hearing names, not spoken aloud, whispered directly into awareness. At first, I ignored it, thought it was memory misfiring in low light. But the names were precise. Too precise. Small details followed. Things I hadn't said to anyone. Things I had only thought. The whispers began correcting themselves over time, like they were learning pronunciation. Learning me. When I turned on the light, everything stopped instantly, but the silence after felt incomplete, as if something had been interrupted mid-sentence. At night, the names returned, closer each time. Eventually, one sounded exactly like mine. Not just pronunciation, but intention, like it wasn't calling me. It was confirming me. And after that night, lights stopped responding the way they used to, as if they hesitated before allowing illumination. It didn't come like the others. There was no warning, no flicker, no gradual loss, just complete failure. The entire city went dark at once. Every source of electricity, gone. At first, people waited for restoration. Hours passed, then days. But the darkness didn't lift. It thickened, like it was accumulating over time instead of dispersing. Movement could still be heard outside. Footsteps, doors, distant sounds of life, but nothing could be confirmed visually. Survivors stopped using lights completely, not because power returned, but because light stopped feeling effective, as if it no longer reached anything real. Communication broke down quickly, not from panic, from disconnection, from not being able to trust what remained unseen. And in that growing silence, something began to feel fully present, not arriving, just no longer hiding. It took time to understand. All the events, all the patterns, they weren't separate. They were connected. Light didn't keep them away. It only made them patient. Every blackout, every flicker, every shadow was the same thing learning how to exist without being noticed. And I finally understood the rule. Turning off lights didn't remove visibility. It removed protection, because they only appear when lights go off, not because darkness creates them, but because darkness stops hiding them. Now, I can't turn lights off without hesitation. Even the idea feels heavy in my hands. But I know it doesn't matter anymore, because they were never waiting for permission, only for absence. And every time light disappears, something has already learned where I am.